Hi and welcome! This tutorial explains how to create expanding and collapsing menus like this, either showing just a button or also a label if the player expands it. I really like these kinds of menus because they free up space for those who have learned which icons to associate with which menus, while being useful scaffolding for the new or returning players out there. I'm going to show two versions of how to create them. The first one will treat it as its own object, like a sidebar overlaying some scenery, giving quick access to some menus. The second one will be part of a larger UI layout, where menu and content need to work together to fill a layout. I put the project files of this tutorial on my Ko-fi. Of course, without the third-party assets I used to make this look nice, but it might help when you are stuck on how to set up your layouts. Also, this tutorial is based on a chapter in my upcoming book on TextMesh Pro. I'm currently in the layouting phase, sitting at about 70,000 words and 900 images across 500 pages. I cover its progress in my community posts. Just as a heads up, the button animations you see come from a tutorial on squash and stretch I did a while ago. Alright, let's start with the simple version. I expect you to start with an empty canvas. Create an empty child object on it, call it collapsing menu, and anchor it to the left of the screen. You can do this by holding Shift and Alt, clicking on the anchoring preset menu, and picking the left side entry. Give the menu a width and height that would fit with what it should look like when expanded. For me, that's about 600 pixel in height and 300 pixel in width. Give it a child image that you set to stretch to full width and height. You can do so by holding Shift and Alt and picking the down right entry here. Working with a simple image works absolutely fine when following this tutorial. And if you are looking to add some rounded corners, I have a tutorial on how to work with 9-sliced images too. However, I want to add an asset I've been working with since the start of this year instead, which quickly turned into one of my favorite UI assets. It's called Flexible Image by Jeff Graw. It lets you create an ultra-wide amount of shapes and shape effects for your UI and is an absolute joy to work with, especially for modern-looking UIs with clean vector-style shapes. For example, I can define how curved which specific edge of the shape is, and if I want them to be just rounded, or if I want to go with a squircle shape. Squircles are a slightly more modern and friendlier version of rounded squares, and you'll see them a lot in this tutorial. Next come the colors for the background gradient and the outline gradient. Lastly, I'll add a striped effect overlaying it, which I hope gives it a bit more visual interest than just going with a flat color. This effect can also be animated, which I'll be using in my second example's progress bars. You can find a link to this one in the pinned comment. But again, following along with a simple image will work without problems. Next we need the entries. I'll create the template outside of the hierarchy we built. Create a new empty child object and give it the same width you just set for the menu. It gets a background image that is set up exactly the same as the background before. Turn its alpha down to 0. This will make sure we have a surface to click when we turn this into a button. This also will get two child objects. The first is the button indicator, which will hold an image for the icon you want to display. This whole entry will be the button, but the indicator is the part that will actually give the visual cue of how the player is interacting with it. It gets another image child object, which again should stretch the full size of its container. This one takes the icon for the entry. Make sure to tick Respect Aspect Ratio in the image component, or your result might come out weirdly squashed and stretched. I want this icon to not bump straight into the edges of the underlying shape, so I will add a bit of a margin all around like this. Don't try to get it perfect right now. Only when you edit all images to all your entries later will you know which values will work for all of them. The indicator needs to be anchored to the left side of the entry, which works the same as we did before for the side menu anchor. Add a bit of a margin to the left side. I'll go with 10 pixels. The second child element of this entry is going to be the label. Create a new TextMesh Pro object, make it stretch the full size of the container, and align the text vertically to the center. Keep the alignment horizontally to the left. This will lead to a more uniform result for the whole menu. Give it the same distance to the image as the image has to the side of the container. If you don't want to do the math yourself, drag the yellow boundary to the right until it snaps in, let go, then add the same distance value to whatever your left entry displays. Again, minus 10 pixels. Keeping these pixel values to rounded up and full numbers will make your life a lot easier going forward. Attach a button script to the entry. I will also add my squash and stretch script so that I can get a bit of feedback when the button gets pressed. Again, not needed going forward, but it's a fun bit of polish. Turn the entry into a prefab, then add it to the menu's hierarchy. This time we are going to anchor it to the top left. This version won't require any further layout components. We can easily spread them out by hand. If you want to make sure you're not accidentally moving it left or right, hold Shift while you do so. From here, make a few more duplicates and move them downwards. Fill out the entries of your menu at this point and customize the icons. Next, we need something to actually control the expansion of the menu. You can either just copy-paste one of the previous icon containers, or create a new one by creating a child element to the menu, adding an image that spans its whole size, and another image to it that will take the icon to display. Add a toggle component to this one. My buttons are all set up the same when it comes to color transitions, so I'll just grab the normal color via the color picker, then copy the remaining colors by clicking on one of the labels, and all three are the same color, by pressing Ctrl+C, then pasting them with Ctrl+V into each entry of the toggle. Raise your hand if you hadn't known you can do this. Don't set up the target graphic of the toggle. This would just show or hide it, but we are going to write a script at the end of this section, which will instead switch between two sprites based on the state of this menu. Alright, this all looks fine for now. Return to the menu container and add a rect mask to D. It's the simplest and most performant mask and perfect for the system we are creating. If you have a stray empty pixel on the side like I have, you can expand the mask to -1 on the left side to make sure that the pixel still gets rendered. See, when we now change the width of the menu, the text gets cut off. And then also our images. This is not quite what we want, right? Open the prefab of your entry, navigate to the icon container and icon, then untick the Maskable checkbox. This will make sure they are not affected by any masks, including the rect mask on its parent object. Back in the scene, we can now see the images poking out over the edge of the menu container. The script we are going to write next will essentially do this expanding and shrinking through code. The text will still be there, just not visible because the minimum width of the menu and its rect mask will cut it off. I'll start with my menu expanded, and if you do too, make sure to set this check mark for is on in the toggle. Skipping this will lead to players having to click twice on it to see an effect, and that's just bad practice. On with the writer, create a new script and call it resize side menu. We have a few things to set up first. The side menu container is a rect transform because we need to affect its width. Size control gets values to use for a fully expanded or collapsed menu. Animation controls gets a check if we want an instant change, or if we don't, with what kind of easing curve we are going to work with and how long the animation should take. A value higher than 0.3 feels a bit too slow, while a value of less than 0.2 can feel almost too snappy. Experiment with these later on. Testing will give us a chance to test the system outside of play mode. The animation works with a coroutine, which we are going to store so that we can adequately start and stop if needed. Reset gets called once when the component is attached to an object. This makes it perfect to handle at least a bit of the setup for us. In Awake, we make sure testing is toggled off, so that we won't run into any issues with that. We also need to subscribe, and later unsubscribe, to the toggle's change in value, so that we don't have to set up everything in the inspector. OnValidate is strictly for testing in the editor, and gets called when a change to the component was registered. This is useful for testing. If we switch that mode to on, the side menu's container is resized to the destination width while keeping its height. Outside of play mode, we can't test for animation, but this will make sure we can test if our two width values are correct. When the toggle gets clicked, onExpander value changed gets executed. It first stops a running coroutine, then starts a new one. If it wouldn't stop it, sizes and positions would get overridden, leading to lots of headaches later on. AnimateChange is the heart of the system and takes the value the toggle was set to determine if the menu should expand or collapse. In the case we want an instant change, there won't be any animations, and the width is directly switched to the new value. Otherwise, the animation gets started with the initial width of the object and current time, then evaluating where in the animation curve we currently are. This will lead to an easing effect, which is typically much nicer to look at than strictly changing the value in a linear fashion. At the end, the size of our container gets set manually to its destination size. This will make sure there are no rounding issues and the menu is always sized appropriately. Save your script and attach it to the menu container. Toggle on testing mode and check if your maximum width and minimum width are set to good values or if they require some more tweaking. At runtime, you can test it with the toggle. Give a few of the preset curves a try. As long as they start low and end high, this system will work. If you're not sure which one you like more, increase the value of the animation duration and watch them in slow motion. The last thing missing is switching out the toggle image based on if clicking it would expand or collapse the menu. Back to Rider. The setup is fairly simple, although we can't have it pick the toggle icon image without giving it clear instructions as to where to look for it. In these cases, doing it manually on the inspector is typically alright. Update icon simply switches out the image of the toggle icon based on its state. If expanded, use the isOn icon. Attach it to the toggle and hook up the two icons. When your menu is expanded, so is set to on, it should display the icon for a collapsed menu and vice versa. Prefab this toggle as well. Give your system a try, and if you enjoyed this so far, please give the video a like and subscribe if you want to learn more about UI and Unity. Now that this works, let's switch over to a slightly more complex looking setup, which works with the layout and anchoring system. Whatever you put on the right side of this layout should work with horizontal and vertical layout groups, layout elements and more. I won't cover how to get everything on the right side to work right now, since that's not the topic of this tutorial, and just shows how the main content will shrink when the menu expands. If you are curious on how to create a setup like the one you see here, watch my deep dive tutorial on the layout system and my tutorial on anchors and pivots. You can also find this project file on my Ko-fi. I'll start with an empty canvas once more and create two child elements, menu and content. Both get a background image that expands in full width and height. Attach a layout element to both and check Ignore Layout. This will make sure they won't be counted as child objects to rearrange once the actual contents are added. Go back to the container and add a horizontal layout group. Check only the two height boxes. While we want the containers to automatically size and height, we do not want this component to control the width and distribution of our children at all. This will make sure we can change the width of both child elements by script. For your contents, it's up to what you want to add there. Make sure to work with the anchoring system and the layout system. For example, my top progress bar is anchored to the top and stretches the full width. That makes sure that when the size of the content container changes, the progress bar will change with it. All other elements are similarly set up, with containers stretching the full width, while the height is typically customized by hand. The only thing stretching in both directions is the scroll view displaying the cards to click on for the player, because that is supposed to fill all the remaining space available, no matter the resolution the player is working with. On the menu side, add the entries and the expander. Then add the vertical layout group to the menu container to have everything spread out. Take a moment and fill those with icons and labels as you need them. Next, add a rect mask 2D to this container as well. Because we are not having the parent container's horizontal layout group control the width of these child elements, we can now test if the texts are getting cut off correctly. This is all the setup we require, so let's head back to writing code for this. We can't simply reuse the previous one, because this new one also needs to control the width of the main contents transform. Create a new script and copy-paste the previous contents into it. I'll only focus on the changes we need to make this time. Start gets 3 rect transforms instead of just 1. The 2 newcomers are for the main container and the content container. Total width grabs the container's width every time it is required. We can get the main container in reset, but we'll have to reference the menu and content by hand. Because we suddenly have 2 very similar values to tweak, onValidate looks a little bit different. Instead of just creating one new vector2 for the width, we will use 2 helper functions for this, which will calculate the required width for multiple locations in our code. The next changes are down in the animateChange method. Wherever we set the previous menu's container value, we replace it with a new helper function and add a line for the content width right below it. That happens in the instant change check, within the while loop, and at the end of the method to make sure we don't end up with odd floats as values. Save the script, switch back to Unity, and attach it to the layout container. Reference the missing elements and test which values work best for the collapsed and expanded state. Once you found those values, start play mode and give the different easing curves a try again. I hope this tutorial was helpful to you. If it was, please give this video a like and leave a comment. I added all the assets I used in this tutorial in the pinned comment as well. Have a great week!